The howling wind swept through, carrying away the swirling dust, revealing a thin figure in a black robe. In the sky above, Zhuang Yuanzi, Mu Hengtian, and Tong Dan all narrowed their eyes slightly at the sight. Flame Emperor, Xiao Yin, 9th grade Supreme Peak? A person from the lower dimension? Tong Dan looked down at Xiao Yin and murmured in slight confusion. Heh, I wondered who it was, but isn't this the man of that female serpent? Zhuang Yuanzi, not far away, looked at the appearing Xiao Yin and gave a faint smile. What's this? I've already returned your wife to you, so why come here? Even though you're a genius from the lower dimension, with your current strength, aren't you afraid of dying young? What? Zhuang Palace Master, is that how you look down on people from the lower dimension? Just as everyone focused their gaze on Xiao Yin, who had suddenly appeared, another faint voice rang out across the heavens and earth. Hearing this voice, both Zhuang Yuanzi and Mu Hengtian's expressions suddenly changed. Hum. As a low hum sounded, the space above the giant pit rippled, and then, under the horrified gazes of Mu Hengtian and Zhuang Yuanzi, a figure slowly stepped out from the distorted space. Wu Wanlong. Mu Hengtian exclaimed in surprise upon seeing the figure. The figure that emerged from the void, Wu Wanlong, turned his gaze to Mu Hengtian, and then a smile curled at the corner of his mouth. What's with that expression? I remember you were eager to see me. I knew this kid couldn't come alone. It turns out he had a backup, Zhuang Yuanzi said as he watched Wu Wanlong appear in midair. Both he and Wu Wanlong were heavenly supremes, so Zhuang Yuanzi couldn't help but feel a sense of dread. So, Zhuang Palace Master, you're really involved in such unspeakable deeds? Just as Zhuang Yuanzi finished speaking, another clear voice echoed across the sky. Upon hearing this voice, Zhuang Yuanzi's expression, which had been surprised but calm, suddenly changed drastically. Ding! A burst of clear light radiated from beside Wu Wanlong, and then, as the space twisted, a graceful figure appeared next to him. Xia Tianqing. In the sky, Tong Dan's expression trembled, and he quickly glanced at Mu Hengtian beside him. He hadn't expected that at such a critical moment, two heavenly supremes would emerge, enough to change the tide of the battle that had originally seemed one-sided. It seems I miscalculated, Mu Hengtian sighed helplessly, looking at Tong Dan. He had initially believed that even if the matter was noticed by the Grand Myriad Heavenly Palace or Western Heaven Palace, the time it would take for them to arrive from the distant Grand Myriad Heavenly region would be at least a day. But the current situation could only mean one thing. Wu Wanlong and the others must have arrived shortly after He Yuanyun set out. Meanwhile, below, in the massive pit, He Yuanyun looked up in shock at the appearance of Xiao Yin and the others. Their arrival had truly exceeded his expectations. You, how did you all get here? He Yuanyun looked at Xiao Yin, surprised. This is a long story, but you should focus on yourself first. Xiao Yin withdrew dozens of heavenly flames into his body, then turned to walk toward the shattered earth where He Yuanyun stood. At the same time, two flames flew from Xiao Yan's body. One was a deep green, and the other transformed into a purple-black flame dragon above his head. Flame of all living beings, 3,000 burning flame. Boom. The deep green flame of all living beings and the purple-black 3,000 burning flame spread out above He Yuanyun, engulfing him. As he was enveloped by the two flames, He Yuanyun soon realized that his injuries were rapidly healing. These two flames, working in tandem, possessed a lifelike healing power, as if they could restore him to life, no matter how severe his wounds were. One day earlier, on a mountain peak outside the Grand Myriad Heavenly region, Xiao Yin and Kai Lin sat quietly, gazing at the distant horizon. He Yuanyun had left an hour ago, but for some unknown reason, Xiao Yin and Kai Lin both felt a strange sense of unease. The primordial divine vein is a highly classified secret within the primordial divine clan, and very few have seen it. It has been shrouded in mystery and secrecy. So even if such a thing is used outside the primordial divine clan, it's unlikely anyone would recognize it. How did the Divine Void Palace come to know of it? Xiao Yin suddenly spoke up. I once saw someone on the central continent, the Shinshu continent, in the Divine Void Palace. This person had a conversation with Zhuang Yuanzi on Shinshu Mountain. His strength was terrifying, probably not inferior to Yuanyun, Heavenly Supreme? Xiao was stunned when he heard this. As far as he knew, on the Central Heaven continent, there were only 5 superpowers with a Heavenly Supreme overseeing them, namely the 3 great palaces, the ancient Heaven Gate, and the last one, the primordial Divine Palace. Although these forces were deeply rooted, each of them had a Heavenly Supreme who could shake the heavens and the earth. While it wasn't impossible that there were other hidden forces with true Heavenly Supreme experts, it was certain that these 5 great overlords were the only ones in control. If one of these 5 overlords were to have a second Heavenly Supreme, it would be enough to suppress any of the other 4 forces. This would make the strongest force not only capable of ruling the Central Heaven continent, but also have the power to become the true overlord. If the Divine Void Palace had 2 Heavenly Supremes, it wouldn't bode well for the other 4 great forces. That expert is not from the Divine Void Palace, Kailin said. I remember Yuanyun seemed to refer to him as Master Mu. Master Mu. Upon hearing Kailin's words, Xiaoyan's expression suddenly changed, and a deep voice came from his mouth. Mu Hongtian, the leader of the ancient Heaven Gate. Xiaoyan suddenly realized. He remembered that when he was negotiating with the Divine Void Palace at the Grand Myriad Heavenly Palace, there had been a note on the back of a reply letter. That message was clearly written by Mu Hongtian, the current leader of the ancient Heaven Gate. Mu Hongtian had a personal feud with Wu Wanlong hundreds of years ago, and Xiaoyan initially thought that Mu Hongtian wanted to use Kailin's situation to form an alliance with Yuanyun to deal with Wu Wanlong. But at Ninefold Mountain, he hadn't seen Mu Hongtian appear at all. Could it be that the matter of the primordial divine vein was told to Yuanyun by Mu Hongtian? Xiaoyan said with doubt. No, Kailin replied. Just like the Divine Void Palace, if the Divine Void Palace wants to obtain the primordial divine vein from an external source, we should consider where the ancient Heaven Gate got their information from. Who else could know about the primordial divine vein except the high-ranking members of the primordial divine clan? Xiaoyan muttered, falling into deep thought. After a few moments, his pupils suddenly contracted. The 12 Holy Sons. A voice of shock escaped Xiaoyan's lips, and Kailin, standing beside him, also trembled upon hearing it. It can't be possible, right? The 12 Holy Sons of the ancient heaven-reaching Python clan. How could they? Kailin said, somewhat incredulously. Do you remember the competition rules within the Soul Clan on the Doqi continent? Xiaoyan looked at Kailin and said, a complete primordial divine vein is divided into 2 parts. 9/10 of it is with the first Holy Sun, and the remaining 1/10 is with the 8th Holy Sun. So what do you think the other 10 Holy Sons would think? You mean? Kailin said in astonishment. Let's go. Xiaoyan stood up and turned his gaze toward the Grand Myriad heavenly region behind him. Let's go find Wu Wanlong and the others. As expected, I guessed it right. It really was the other 12 Holy Sons plotting behind this. In the giant pit, Xiaoyan looked up at Yuanyun and Mu Hongtian in the sky. He then shifted his gaze to another spot where a bald young man in a brown windbreaker was hovering in midair, staring at him with a cold look in his eyes. That's the 4th Holy Son, Tong Dan, Xiaoyan said as he turned to look at Kailin. Behind him, He Yuanyun, whose injuries had been gradually healing due to the flame of all living beings and the 3,000 burning flame, was slowly sitting up and meditating, urging his spiritual energy to speed up his recovery. I didn't expect we'd fall into the trap of 2 of the Holy Sons this time, He Yuanyun said, looking up at Tong Dan and Yin Yao in the sky. Whoosh, whoosh. 2 sounds of breaking air rang out as Wu Wanlong and Xia Tianqing descended from the sky. You young ones are too arrogant, Wu Wanlong said, glancing at He Yuanyun with a faint expression. These Divine Void Palace and Ancient Heaven Gate are truly bold, daring to set their sights on the primordial divine vein. Xia Tianqing also commented. We'll talk about these matters later. Let's handle the situation in front of us first, Wu Wanlong said, turning his gaze back toward Yuanyun and the others in the sky. Oh? Now our combat powers are more or less evenly matched. Do Yuanyun and Mu Hongtian still want to keep attacking us to gain the upper hand? Xia Tianqing said. They have no choice but to fight, Xiaoyan said. The current situation has already made the positions of the Divine Void Palace and Ancient Heaven Gate clear. If He Yuanyun returns to the Ancient Heaven-reaching Python clan, those two holy sons might have an excuse to delay, but for the Divine Void Palace and Ancient Heaven Gate, they don't have that luxury. What's left for them now is only the wrath of the Ancient Heaven-reaching Python clan. That's interesting. Today, I will see how they manage, Xiao Tianqing said, looking at Mu Hengtian and the others in the sky, his tone stern. At that moment, in the sky above, Zhuang Yuanji also gazed with a heavy expression at Mu Hengtian and Tong Dan. With a swift movement, he flew in front of them, and not far behind. Yin Yao also rushed towards them. The situation is already beyond control, Tong Dan said, standing with his hands behind his back, looking at Mu Hengtian and Zhuang Yi. But the reason for this mess is due to your negligence. What? Mu Hengtian and Zhuang Yuanji were both taken aback, not expecting Tong Dan to directly shift the blame onto them. Mu Hengtian was especially furious. Had it not been for Tong Dan seeking him out and making him plan this, the Ancient Heaven Gate wouldn't have gotten involved in this mess. As for the Divine Void Palace, it was even worse. They failed to accomplish their goal and ended up losing everything. Among the 12 holy sons, my rank is higher than He Yuanyun's, but He Yuanyun possesses 1/10 of the primordial divine vein within him, which gives him some connections with the first holy son. If he returns to the clan, I might endure a prolonged imprisonment, but those old fools in the clan and the first holy son will likely never let you off the hook, Tong Dan continued, his gaze narrowing slightly. However, the situation is not without hope. Zhuang Yuanji and Mu Hengtian's expressions hardened upon hearing this. They both knew what Tong Dan was about to suggest. The enemy also has 2 heavenly supremes. If you can hold them off, the battle will be largely decided. That kid who suddenly appeared is merely a 9th grade supreme, not even a match for a Earth supreme. Let Yin Yao deal with him, while I take on He Yuanyun. He's already wounded, and though his primordial divine vein makes it difficult to defeat him immediately, as long as we can hold out until Yin Yao takes down that kid, we can team up and definitely crush He Yuanyun, Tong Dan said, looking at Xiao Tianqing and Xiao Yin, who were in the giant pit below. There's no other way, Zhuang Yuanji replied. Below, Xiao Yin and the others looked up at Zhuang Yuanji and the others, knowing that a great battle was inevitable. The 4 heavenly supremes gathered would unleash a battle powerful enough to destroy a continent. I will hold off Mu Hengtian and Zhuang Yuanji with the palace master and others, but the enemy's lineup doesn't look promising for us, Wu Wanlong said calmly, then turned his gaze to Xiao Yin. When you were in the Grand Myriad Heavenly Palace, did you take out a mysterious pill? Upon hearing this, Xiao Yin flicked his finger, and a white jade pill appeared. The energy emanating from it indicated it was an advanced mysterious pill. This is the Bodhi Great Return Pill. It is an improved pill I created in the lower dimension. Back in the Do-Chi continent, Xiao Yin had engaged in pill concoction duels with some elders from the Pill Tower. At that time, Xiao Yin had won by successfully refining a 9th grade treasure pill, which was the Bodhi Great Return Pill. The Bodhi Emperor Return Pill that he held now was the result of over a decade of study after Xiao Yin became a Do-Di, and its rank had reached the Advanced Emperor grade, equivalent to an advanced mysterious pill in the Great Thousand Worlds. However, the Bodhi Great Return Pill doubled the success rate when advancing to Half Saint, while the Bodhi Emperor Return Pill could instantly double the strength of a 9th grade Supreme, 9th star Do-Di, and below, but only for less than half an hour. After retrieving the advanced mysterious pill, Xiao Yin explained its effects to Wu Wanlong and the others. Take this pill, Wu Wanlong said, looking at Xiao Yin. You may need to deal with the weaker holy son of the divine clan. He has reached the early stages of Earth Supreme, so you need to bridge the gap in strength to delay as much as possible. Upon hearing Wu Wanlong's words, Xiao Yan's gaze shifted to He Yuanyun behind him. I think it's better if Brother He takes the pill. However, Brother He's strength already exceeds the pill's limits, so its effectiveness will likely be only a quarter of the original. At Xiao Yan's suggestion, both Wu Wanlong and Xiao Tianqing were surprised, unable to understand his reasoning. The difference between the Mid-Earth Supreme and Late-Earth Supreme isn't too vast, and can be temporarily bridged. But do you know the difference between a 9th grade Supreme and an Earth Supreme? Wu Wanlong asked, looking at Xiao with doubt. If it's just for delaying, I think it's still doable. Wu Wanlong and Xia Tianqing exchanged a glance before letting out a helpless sigh. However, seeing Xiao expression, it seemed that he might actually have a way to stall a mid-stage Earth Supreme. Guess we'll have to trust you for now, Xia Tianqing said. I'll stop Tong Dan, Wu Wanlong continued. Although he's stronger than I am, I still have ways to make him wary. Behind them, He Yuanyun, who had been sitting on the ground, slowly stood up. Thanks to the healing from the flame of all living beings and the 3,000 burning flame, the relatively light injuries on his body had somewhat recovered. Whoosh! Whoosh! A green and a purple-black flame shot out from He Yuanyun's body and flew back into Xiao, while He Yuanyun glanced at Xiao and said, "Do you really have the confidence to hold Yin Yao off?" Upon hearing this, Xiao could only smile. Let's try. If I can't win, he won't be able to stop me from leaving. On the vast and desolate nameless continent, the entire world seemed stiflingly heavy. It was this very desolation that caused the continent to be abandoned by others. Of course, a closer inspection would reveal that, apart from the desolation, the land was also littered with signs of destruction, indicating that it had once been a battlefield. At a certain location on this nameless continent, a massive pit thousands of meters in diameter stood out as a prominent landmark. In midair above the pit, 4 figures hovered. Xiao, Wu Wanlong, Xia Tianqing, and He Yuanyun faced 4 other figures not far away, and their spiritual energy began to stir. The spiritual energy of the entire region began to violently fluctuate as well. On the opposite side, Zhuang Yuanzi and Mu Hengtian stood beside Tong Dan and Yin Yao, their eyes fixed on Wu Wanlong's group. The current situation left little doubt that a fierce battle was unavoidable. Mu Hengtian, it seems the grudge from hundreds of years ago must be settled today, Wu Wanlong said, his voice carrying a cold tone. Do you really think that just because you've reached the Earth Supreme, I have no way to deal with you? Mu Hengtian's gaze sharpened slightly, and then everyone felt a terrifying aura emanating from him, causing the entire nameless continent to tremble. This aura was far stronger than that of a typical early-stage Earth Supreme, approaching the mid-stage Earth Supreme. Even Zhuang Yuanzi was momentarily stunned. Similarly, Xia Tianqing's eyes narrowed slightly. If one were to consider pure spiritual energy cultivation, Mu Hengtian would likely be among the strongest in the entire Central Heaven continent, and even she acknowledged that she could not surpass him. The ancient Heaven Gate has been passed down for tens of thousands of years, and I am its strongest in the last 10,000 years. Mu Hengtian looked at Wu Wanlong and said in a low voice. Among the dozens of grandmasters over the millennia, he ranked 4th. Peak early stage Earth Supreme, huh? Wu Wanlong felt the terrifying aura emanating from Mu Hengtian, and under its pressure, the surrounding 100,000 miles of space seemed to be under his control. Buzz. However, facing this terrifying power, Wu Wanlong simply smiled. As a beam of light erupted from his body, a similarly overwhelming aura enveloped the area, causing Mu Hengtian to pause. The terrifying spiritual energy forced Mu Hengtian's control to retreat, and this pressure, too, reached the peak of early-stage Earth Supreme, with only 1 step left to mid-stage Earth Supreme. Now you'll see how I earned my position as the Elder of the Western Heaven Palace. Swish. As Wu Wanlong's words fell, his figure disappeared. Mu Hengtian's expression darkened, and with a shift of his body, he crossed through the void, vanishing as well. Boom. 2 incredibly fast figures collided in the sky, and the immense power sent shockwaves that scattered the clouds within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles. The 2 shadows then shot across the sky, piercing toward the distant horizon. 10 breaths later, a world-shattering battle between Earth Supremes began 100,000 miles away. Master Xia, I too have no way out. In midair, Zhuang Yuanzi stared at Xia Tianqing ahead and said in a low voice. Immediately, a terrifying aura, as vast as the sky, surged from his body. Although slightly weaker than Mu Hengtian and Wu Wanlong, it still reached the early stage of Heavenly Supreme. No more words are needed. Earlier, I gave you 10 million Supreme spiritual liquid from the Grand Myriad Heavenly Palace, but you remain unrepentant," Xia Tianqing said, as an aura no less terrifying than Zhuang Yuanzi's also spread from his body. Upon hearing this, Zhuang Yuanzi stopped speaking further. His body moved, transforming into a streak of light, and in the blink of an eye, he appeared above a height of 100,000 zhang. Yet, he did not stop, but instead flew toward the even higher million zhang altitude. Seeing this, Xia Tianqing glanced at Xiao Yin and He Yuanyun beside him, then moved to follow Zhuang Yuanzi. The power of a heavenly supreme is too terrifying. If it were unleashed on the ground, the aftershocks within a radius of hundreds of thousands of miles could crush even an Earth Supreme expert. That is why Wu Wanlong and Mu Hongtian fought at over 100,000 miles away, to avoid affecting Tong Dan and Yin Yao. Boom, boom, boom. In the distant sky, wind and thunder surged, clearly signaling the beginning of another heavenly supreme battle. On the other side, over 100,000 miles away, the land had collapsed and the space shattered. The rippling spiritual energy waves crushed countless giant peaks of 10,000 zhang. Such a scale of battle, if it occurred in a lower dimension, would likely overwhelm the fragile world. I will hold back Tong Dan. As for Yin Yao, He Yuanyun glanced at Xiao Yin and spoke. His injuries were almost fully recovered by now. "Brother He, you can trust me to deal with Yin Yao," Xiao Yin replied. "When I left the clan, I left a trace of soul mark with a Grand Elder. If I were severely injured, the mark would change. It seems that the Grand Elder has already sensed it when I was hurt earlier. With the other two holy sons also having left the clan, the Grand Elder might be on his way now, guided by the soul mark," He Yuanyun explained. The 12 holy sons are split into two factions, 11, 9, 8, 5, 3, and 1 form one faction, and the Grand Elder supports our faction. So, all you need to do is hold on until the Grand Elder arrives. "I see," Xiao Yin murmured upon hearing this. "It seems there are strong factional conflicts within the ancient heaven-reaching Python clan. Hehe, He Yuanyun, do you really think you can stop me?" On the opposite side, Tong Dan looked at He Yuanyun and grinned. He then slowly raised his palm, and with a sudden grip, an extremely terrifying aura enveloped the surroundings. The immense solidity of this power had reached the late stage of Earth Supreme. "Since you are willing to hand over the primordial divine vein, I will take it myself," Tong Dan said, and as his voice fell, his body transformed into a streak of light, darting out with a terrifying speed. On the opposite side, He Yuanyun's gaze sharpened as he watched Tong Dan charge. A vast force of heaven and earth spiritual energy surged from within him. However, this energy only reached the mid-stage of Earth Supreme, significantly weaker than Tong Dan. "Today, we'll see how you handle me." With a deep voice, He Yuanyun flipped his hand, and a medicinal pill appeared. A Bodhi Great Return pill, given to him by Xiao Yin. He Yuanyun flicked his finger, sending the pill into his mouth. Whoosh! As the pill entered his mouth, it transformed into vast heaven and earth energy, filling He Yuanyun's supreme sea. A more powerful spiritual energy spread from his body, and above his head, a massive expanse of land formed, standing several tens of thousands of zhang high, with mountains rising upon it. Phenomenon of heaven and earth. Boom, boom. The gigantic landmass, carrying terrifying force, crushed forward, suppressing everything in its path. Under the oppressive force of heaven and earth, the land within 1,000 miles sank by dozens of zhang. An Earth Supreme expert's power could even alter the terrain with ease. "Don't try these tricks in front of me." Facing the approaching landmass, Tong Dan grinned viciously and then activated the surrounding spiritual energy, shaping it into a massive, tens of thousands of zhang giant palm. It was as if a massive, ancient hand from the primeval times was descending from the heavens. The hand appeared so real, with its surface covered in withered, ancient patterns. The giant hand then clenched into a fist and slammed directly down onto the massive land plate that was coming to suppress it. The impact was so earth-shattering, so visually overwhelming, that under this immense force, the land plate, which was filled with the pressure of heaven and earth, was shattered into countless fragments. The space around it couldn't withstand the power and cracked apart as well. "Ha ha, He Yuanyun. Let me show you how impossible it is to surpass the ranking of the Holy Sons. Tong Dan laughed loudly, his figure shooting forward once more. Not far away, He Yuanyun's expression shifted. Even with his temporary boost of power, the gap between a mid-Earth Supreme and a late-Earth Supreme was still immense. 2 elements. Annihilation Emperor Seal. He Yuanyun muttered softly. Then, with a sweep of his palm, 2 divine seals, one gold and one black, shot out, converging in front of him to form a 2 elements divine seal radiating with dark golden light. Swish. As the 2 elements divine seal took shape, He Yuanyun didn't hesitate for a second. He pointed a finger, and a small black line shot through the sky, heading straight for the oncoming Tong Dan with piercing speed. Would you kindly point that thing at your own people? Seeing the black line heading towards him, Tong Dan grinned and, with a flick of his finger, formed a 2 elements Annihilation Emperor Seal identical to He Yuanyun's. The divine seal appeared, and another small black line shot out, colliding with the one heading toward him. The 2 black lines annihilated each other in mid-air. This seemingly simple annihilation was enough to make even the most powerful of Heavenly Supremes wary. With He Yuanyun's attack neutralized, Tong Dan's figure soared through the sky. Before He Yuanyun could react, Tong Dan was already in front of him. Defeating me? It won't be so easy. Looking at the sudden appearance of Tong Dan, He Yuanyun clenched his fist and threw a punch. Tong Dan merely smirked, raising his own fist to meet it. Boom. The 2 fists, each filled with destructive power, collided like falling meteors. However, He Yuanyun's strength still couldn't match Tong Dan's, and soon, the force from the impact sent He Yuanyun flying backward. Bang! The strength of the divine beasts was formidable. The heavy punch sent He Yuanyun crashing backward for tens of thousands of miles. Ahead, Tong Dan's figure followed closely, and the 2 figures gradually vanished from sight. At this moment, in the air where they had just clashed, only 2 figures remained, standing face to face. Xiao and Yao, suspended in midair, their eyes locked onto each other. Our primordial divine clan has been quite generous to your lower dimension. If not for the assistance of the powerful beings from our clan, you lower dimensions would have probably been invaded by the extraterritorial evil clan long ago, Yao said, his gaze indifferent as he looked at Xiao from a distance. So, if you know what's good for you, I won't kill you and will even let you escape. What do you say? Xiao eyes narrowed slightly as he listened. He looked at Yao in front of him, and a faint smile slowly spread across his face. A soft chuckle escaped his lips.